So, probably one of the biggest pieces of advice that my dad tried to instill in me growing up was to be smart and wise with my money. And there were some other topics that he really tried to teach about, and there were some that I wish he would have talked more about, and he didn't. But that one really kind of stands out as the one he probably talked about the most, as being smart with my money. And, my dad was not a Christian when I was growing up, so he was missing some key elements for a big picture of godly stewardship, but he knew how numbers worked, and so that's what he taught. And I grew up with a mentality of avoiding debt and putting money away for retirement. And, as I learned more about God added some pieces to that. But that starting point served me well. And Heather and I do not have a huge income. And yet God has blessed us abundantly. And we've done really well with the income that we have. And I believe that's largely to do with our mindset of applying biblical stewardship to the way we live. So, something that our campus minister said when Heather was a student at CMU about finances was that you could learn a lot about someone if you looked at their checkbook or app, whatever you use to calculate your payments and stuff. And if you were to take a sneak peek into our checkbook app, I think that would reflect that we try to apply those biblical principles. And I'm sure we have a lot of different financial backgrounds represented here tonight. You may have come from a wealthy family that taught you to be wise financially so you can follow in their footsteps. You may have come from a wealthy family that pretty much taught you can get what you want right now, whenever you want it. You may have come from a lower income family that's done amazingly well. You may have come from a middle income family that kind of repeatedly shot itself in the foot because of poor financial choices. Your family might have directly taught you finances, or maybe they didn't really teach anything other than the example that they set with how they managed their finances. And you may have pieced together a financial worldview from other sources. So your starting point tonight might be biased towards, just the worldly part of smart finances, or the whole package of godly finances, or maybe just unwise finances is what you've kind of gleaned from places. And or maybe your view on money so far is pretty much a blank slate, which that's not a bad place to be tonight. But our finances are a pretty big deal, and that doesn't surprise God. He knew that finances would be a struggle for a lot of us. We'd get caught up in it. And so he devoted a lot of the Bible, a lot of his word, to teaching us about finances and about biblical stewardship. And there are hundreds of passages about stewardship, including many Proverbs about it. And so within our Proverbs series, we're going to spend a few weeks looking at Proverbs that talk about stewardship and godly stewardship. So if anyone's tempted to disengage because of the topic of money, the church is bringing up money, I'm going to tune out, I'm going to challenge you not to. And just hear this series through and then put it to the test yourself to see if God holds up his end of the bargain. And let me just warn you, there's going to be a lot of very practical info tonight. So if you ever have thought about taking notes, tonight would be a really good time because there's going to be a lot of notes that you could take tonight. You can do that on your announcement sheet or grab one from the center aisle there, or use the notes app, whatever. But our theme proverb tonight is Proverbs 22:7. I missed that. God blesses us when we manage finances his way. So, as we go into this series, this mini-series on stewardship within Proverbs, God blesses us when we manage finances His way. So our theme proverb is Proverbs 22:7, which says, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender." Rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. So it turns out that those main financial principles that my dad tried to teach me even before he was a Christian ended up being very biblical concepts. God's wisdom teaches us to stay clear of debt. Stay clear of debt. The rich rules over the poor. The borrower is a slave of the lender. This was actually literal in Bible times. Exodus 22:3 said that if a thief is caught and they have nothing to repay what they stole, that the thief should be sold to pay for their debt. Sold into slavery. And in Matthew 18, verses 23 through 25, Jesus opened a parable by describing this man who owed the king a ridiculous amount of money. And since he could not pay it, the king ordered that man and his entire family be sold as slaves to pay off the debt. So, human trafficking is a pretty big deal today. This was not human trafficking. It wasn't kidnapping someone and putting them into forced service against their will. This was the legal consequence of spending more than you have and not being able to pay it back. So if you ran out of possessions to pay with, you had to pay it back with yourself, and I guess if it was a ridiculous amount of debt, with your family as well. So back in Bible times, there was no such thing as declaring bankruptcy. The government did step in and protect people from their own foolish mistakes. In Bible times, if I couldn't pay my debt, it cost me my freedom. So that was a pretty good incentive not to go into debt at that time. So, of course, today that's not the case legally or physically. We're not sold into slavery if we go into debt. But it's still true financially. Debt comes at the expense of my future freedom. Debt comes at the expense of my future freedom. If I become a slave to debt now, I won't be able to do the things I want to later on in life. So, and why is that? Because of paying interest. And Deuteronomy 23, verse 20, said that God allowed the Israelites to charge interest if they were lending to foreigners, although He didn't want them to charge interest against one another. They're supposed to have this brotherhood community. But so paying interest is a really old concept. And that's why being in debt is so bad, is because you have to pay back more than what you received. That's the whole concept of interest. And the longer it takes to pay off, the amount you pay goes up exponentially. Look at Romans 13, verses 7 and 8. Romans 13, verses 7 and 8. It says, "Pay to all what is owed them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law." So the New Testament tells us to owe no one anything except love each other, which isn't really a financial thing. Owe no one anything. That's pretty hard for our culture to grasp today. But this is a very, very biblical concept of not going into debt and not paying interest. So for the rest of our time tonight, I want to go through some very practical modern day examples and a few of you have heard this before in a little workshop, but this is really going to drive the point home when we look at some numbers. So let's consider first a car loan as an example of debt. Let's say there's two guys looking for a car. The first one's name's Brian. So just kind of go to the next point there. Let's say Brian really wants a new Chevy Malibu. These two guys both want a new vehicle. Brian really wants a new Chevy Malibu, so he takes out a $22,000 loan at 4.74% interest for 6 years. And I looked that up. That is an interest rate that Chase is offering today for an auto loan for that length of time. So his payment would be $350, $351.66 a month. And then he's told you'll save money on repairs by buying new. So let's consider another guy. We'll just call him Chad. So Chad purchases a $4,000 used car out of savings. Maybe he saved up for it a little bit. He puts $350 a month into savings toward his next car. So he's making the same monthly payments. He's just paying himself instead of the bank. So he drives the car for 3 years and puts $1,500 in repairs into it. So that's not really good. That's kind of a lot of repairs. So he finally decides the car's not worth any more repairs. So 3 years later, let's see what Brian does. Let's say he put average miles on his Malibu. And Blue Book says his car is now only worth $9,579. But he still owes the bank $11,779. That's $2,200 difference. So, what's next? Chad purchases another used car for $4,000 out of savings. He continues to save. Bad luck, again, got another junker, puts another $1,500 in repairs into this car over the next 3 years. Okay, so 6 years from the start. Brian has spent $25,320 on his $22,000 new car. His car is getting old, and he trades it in and gets a new loan for another new car. Chad has spent $11,000 on his used cars, including repairs. He's saved $18,200, including the money he took out to purchase the other car and the repairs. So he purchased his third car new in cash and continues to save. So that's just, when you look at some numbers, it really puts it into perspective for us. And to really drive that home, what if, and I'm just picking on Brian, but what if the person who did this lost their job at the 3-year mark when they owe the bank $2,200 more than the car's worth, and they can't make the payments? Then you get into trouble. Now, is it always bad to get a loan for a car? Now, Heather and I got our Colorado truck with a loan. We got it used, and it had low miles, but we paid it off in 1 year. So with the interest rate we got, paying it off in 1 year basically amounted to $200 of interest we paid for our car loan. And for the situation we had, it was this car dealership that had been trying to get rid of it for 6 months. It was just sitting on their lot. They wanted it gone. So they dropped the price below, like $3,000 below the Blue Book value. So for our situation, we ended up saving $3,000 by paying $200 extra in interest. So the math worked out to do it that way. But you have to make sure the math works out before you do that. So in most situations, consumer debt doesn't make sense. The math doesn't work out. So let's look at a different kind of example. Let's consider credit card debt. So we've got a table here, And we're just kind of fill it in line by line. You don't have to copy this table. But so we're going to go ahead and do the second line too. So we're going to look at the monthly payment that you make towards your $5,000 credit card debt. We're going to look at 3 different interest rates. You may get something in the mail that says 0% interest rate, and then, or 1.9% interest rate, and then you read the fine print, it says for 3 months, or maybe 6 months, and then it reverts to one of these. It probably reverts to one of these within the first year. So, if you paid such and such a monthly rate, it would take this many years to pay off, and you would have totally paid this much. So with 12% interest, you paid $100 a month towards that, and you're not adding anything more to that debt, just that $5,000. It would take you 5.8 years to pay it off, and you would have paid a total of $7,000 on $5,000 worth of stuff. For 20.99%, it would take you 10 years to pay it off at $100 a month, and you would have paid a total of $12,000 for your $5,000 worth of stuff. At 31.24%, you would never pay it off at $100 a month. So, what if you upped your payment to $105? Just bump it up. You can't afford much. You pay it off a little bit quicker, and you pay a little bit less for each of these. It drops it. You still won't ever pay it off at the high interest rate. Say you bump it up a little bit more, and now you're down to 4.8 for the 12% interest rate. 66 instead of 7,000. And you can see it just drops down. You still won't ever pay it off at the 31% interest rate. Bump it up a little more, it pays off a little sooner. You pay a little less. And then now you would finally get it done in a little over 6.5 years at the 31% interest rate. You would have paid $11,850 for it. Double it. You've really dropped it down. By doubling the payment, you're paying it in faster than twice, less than twice the time. If that makes sense. You've only paid $800 in interest instead of a ridiculous amount, and it lowers it for all of these. And then, if you really knocked it out, you'd have it done in just over 1.5 years, and paid a little less interest, and then the same for these. So, your monthly payment that would never pay off these debts at the different interest rates, at $50 a month, you would never pay off the $5,000 at the 12% rate. At $87 a month, you would never pay it off at the 21% rate. At $130, you would never pay it off at the 31% interest rate. So, a credit card is a tool, and depending on whether we apply God's wisdom to it, we can end up serving credit cards. The borrower is the slave of the lender, or we can make them serve us. It can work the other way if you apply God's wisdom. And there's 3 keys to using a credit card wisely. 3 keys to using a credit card wisely. You can, and I believe you should, use a credit card wisely if you have the discipline for it. Only if you have the discipline for it. So, the first key is choose one with no annual fee. And that just look at the paperwork. So many are offered that don't charge an annual fee. Why would you throw an extra $90 away every year for no apparent reason? The second one, choose one with a rewards program. I've got 4 rewards credit cards in my wallet right now. Got a Discover card, got an Amazon Visa, got a AAA gas rebate MasterCard, and a Target card. So those first 2, every purchase I make just gives a little bit of a percentage of that goes toward points. And you rack up enough points, you can withdraw a check, you can purchase a gift card to a restaurant, to a travel agency, whatever, to a store. So that's how the first two ones work. The other one, the gas rebate credit card, every time I use pay at the pump, I get 2.5% back off the purchase. The Target card, every time I buy something at Target, it automatically takes 5% off when I make the purchase. So those are some examples of rewards programs that are smart to use because they actually save you money instead of making you pay extra money. And then the third one, Heather and I use rewards cards for basically all our purchases, so we get to turn in those rewards often. See, treat it like a debit card and balance it like your checkbook. Treat it like a debit card and balance it like your checkbook. Here's how to balance it. Whether you use a paper register the old-fashioned way, or an app, or a spreadsheet. Here's what we do. When we make a credit card purchase, we put the receipt in our wallet. When the cashier asks if I want a receipt, I always think, duh, because if you don't keep the receipt, you can't keep track of it. So we then, every week, couple weeks, whatever, we get out all the receipts and we line it up with our statement. And we just kind of go through it line by line, make sure everything lines up. That way, if we forgot about a receipt, we'll catch it on the statement. Or if someone tries identity theft, because we're regularly comparing things, we'll notice right away if something's not right. So you just compare those, make sure everything lines up. And like in our checkbook register, we'll put the name of the credit card instead of the check number. And that way, you can, if you do a program, you can kind of sort which one, these are the Discover ones, and the total should match the total that you owe on your Discover bill. So the money that we spent on, because we do that, we subtract it out, we already consider the money spent, even though it's still sitting in our checking account. So when the Discover card bill comes, and there's like a 25-day cycle that you have to pay stuff back, when the bill comes, all of that money is sitting in our checking account. We can just write a check and it's paid for, and we don't have to worry about whether it's there or not. So, and listen closely to this. Some people will give you the advice that carrying a balance on your credit cards will help to build your credit. And that is absolutely untrue. It is the opposite of true. Accumulating debt lowers your credit. Paying a debt on time or sooner builds your credit. Accumulating debt lowers your credit, and paying a debt on time or sooner builds your credit. So is debt always a bad thing? Like I gave the example of our truck purchase. But in general, it's something to stay away from. But here's 3 situational exceptions to the no debt rule. A, school loan. B, mortgage. C, business loan. A school loan, a mortgage, or a business loan. With these types of loans, we're borrowing money now with the hopes of having a higher return later. And so they're investments. Is why these are okay. But they're only exceptions when they are investments and only when the math works out. Within the next 5 to 10 years, you will probably be thinking about purchasing a house. You think, it's 1 million years away. Within the next 5 to 10 years, you will probably be thinking about a house. Even if you're a freshman, you'll be 5 years out of college, and you'll be thinking, it's about time I put my money towards something good instead of wasting it on rent. So if you've been using a credit card wisely between now and then, you're going to have a good credit score to get a mortgage with, and you'll get a good interest rate. The better your credit score, the lower interest rate you'll get for a mortgage. and then you choose a house that you can fix up a little bit, and then it's then it's investment. If you ever sell that house, you would potentially make more than what you bought it for. That's the whole idea of it. So, on the other hand, if you're racking up $100,000 worth of student loans to be a career fry cook, that's not an investment. That's unwise. So, we've got one more practical example. Let's look at the math for student loans. So for student loans, let's put our table up there. Let's say you've got $40,000 of student loans. Okay, we're going to look at a couple different interest rates, subsidized and unsubsidized. What's the difference between those? Subsidized means you're not responsible for interest until 6 months after you graduate. Unsubsidized means the bank's already charging you interest now, even though you're not making any payments until 6 months after you graduate. So, if you say, I want to pay my student loans off in 25 years, it's a long time to pay off student loans. Your monthly payment would be $206 for 3.76%, and you would have paid a total of $61,761 on your $40,000 of school loans. For the 6.8% subsidized, a little bit higher payment, a little bit higher total, and if they're already charging you interest now on it, it makes your payment that much higher, and your total $106,879 for your $40,000 worth of student loans. Let's say there's no way I'm going to pay this off for the rest of my life. I'm going to do 10 years. Your monthly payment would be $400 at 3.76. A lot lower total, only $8,000 worth of interest, but still that's $8,000 worth of interest. You can see a little bit higher for the higher interest rate, and if they're charging you interest already, it's going to be even higher. Let's say you want to pick it out in 6 years. You don't want to take 10 years to do it. Brings your monthly payment up quite a bit to do that. And you're only paying $4,700 in interest, or at the higher interest rates, it's still more. Let's say you really want to get it done. If you want to pay it off in 4 years at a 3.76% interest rate, that's almost $900 a month. Every month for the next 4 years before that student loan is behind you. Or higher if you've got an interest rate that's worse than that. I don't want to depress anybody right now, but now's your chance to make some adjustments if you need to. If you got one of these, maybe a couple of these, consolidate to a lower interest rate that is actually the interest is deferred, or you make some interest payments while you're in school to get those numbers down. So, any payments you can make early or extra on a student loan will work to reduce interest, pay it off for less, and pay it off sooner. Part of your refund check, if you get a big refund check, instead of going and blowing it on stuff, could put some of it back towards knocking these numbers down, if you don't need it for living on. So yes, going to college is an investment in your future, but you want to make sure the math works out, and you want to try to be wise about that. And don't treat student loans as if they're not real debt, because they are. Like sometimes you'll ask a recent graduate, what kind of debt do you have? Oh, I don't have any debt, like thinking I don't have a car payment, I don't have credit card debt, but I've got $50,000 in student loans. Well, that's debt. It's real debt. So don't take out more than you need for student loans. Do pay them off literally as soon as possible to maximize their value to you and to free up your future. so you're not making those payments forever. So I think when we look at the numbers, when we look at the math, it really speaks volumes about why debt is bad. We could have just talked about the Bible says debt is bad, and it wouldn't have rang the bell like actually looking at the impact that it has on us. So let's bring it back around to where we started. And the borrower is slave to the lender. Debt comes at the expense of my future freedom. And God blesses us when we manage finances His way. Give you a little glimpse of where we're going the rest of this semester. This was installment 1 of the 3-part series on Stewardship Proverbs. After that, we're going to wrap up Proverbs by talking about the Proverbs 31 woman. And then it'll be Thanksgiving. We're going to do a worship night that week for Thanksgiving if you don't go home extra early. And then we're going to talk about having a vision for the world, God's vision for the world, right before our finals week. So we're getting close, and that's where we're going. Let me pray.